Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Fail with Fire. I am your podcast host, Phoenix Ha. I am the CEO and co-founder of AdBeacon. And again, this is a podcast just talking about the failures that led to the fires that were catalysts for change. Some of the biggest industry names are here and just everyday people. And I think getting back to who we are as people is the most important thing. So today I am pumped to introduce Sean Frank. A lot of you know Sean from Ridge Wallets /rings /luggage /growth. Also the Operators podcast with some of the best in the game as well. And just as an official introduction, Sean joined Ridge officially in 2018 as the CEO. However, he was a part of the agency that was working with them in 2016 that was later then acquired. And now they have upwards of 80 employees.
Something
US.
like that. Yeah.
Something insane. Sean, welcome to the podcast.
Cool. Thanks for having me. Love to be here.
Yeah. One of my favorite things to do here is kind of do like an intro of how I know you. And I don't even know if you know this, but I met you at the Commerce Roundtable event in 2023. You were speaking on just like a live, I think, podcast for the Operators podcast. And I was fascinated more so of the way your brain thinks in terms of how to operate a business, what profitability growth actually means. I think it was the first raw conversation I had heard on stage in a long time. So I very much appreciate that. And I wanted to bring you to the table because I think authenticity is going to be like a huge thing, no matter what you do and what you say. So welcome. We're really happy to have you.
Yeah. Raw or unprepared, those things go hand in hand. I typically do not put together slides or presentations, so I did not prepare for this either. So you'll get another raw conversation coming at you.
I prefer it that way, actually. Get as raw as possible. Okay, so we do this like little bit, and this is kind of like an icebreaker, but if I were to meet you at a barbecue and your mom, your spouse, whoever pulls me and goes, Phoenix, I need you to meet Sean, how would they introduce you? Would they say what you do? How would they introduce you?
They would just say I sell wallets on the internet. That's basically the joke for everyone who's been an executive at Ridge for like 6 years at this point. We just go, oh yeah, I sell wallets on the internet. And if I think a good proxy for that is like when an Uber asks you what you do, you're like, yeah, I just sell wallets on the internet. And they go, well, okay, that makes sense. And then you kind of move on. And then if they're super online, it'll be followed up with like, oh, like crypto wallets. Every time I go to like a tech conference, people think I sell crypto. And nah, just normal ass wallets, dude, sold on Shopify.
They're not just normal ass wallets. So the ones that like are the metal, for those of you who don't know Ridge, and you're definitely Googling Ridge now. If you don't know, it's actually fascinating. But like you guys have the metal on the outside. And also, so from a consumer standpoint, like the dumb standpoint, right? I go, okay, those are the wallets the dudes always get because they say that their information's going to be stolen. So this is going to be one of those that like protects from that. Also, it's really condensed. So people don't feel like the traditional wallet was really like bulky. And this was completely different. And then I ended up buying my husband a wedding band and ring from you guys. And that was really cool too, because I saw that expansion of product. And now you're in luggage, which is
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll do a couple $100 million this year, mostly selling wallets. And people always talk about like the problem you're solving for consumers. And I think the real problem is that like you have a brother or a cousin or an uncle and you have to get them a Christmas present or a birthday present or something. And you don't know their size, right? You can't get them a hoodie. You can't get them a t-shirt. So I think what Yeti really crushed is getting somebody like a one size fits all masculine water bottle. We do the same thing with wallets, right? So it's a very gift heavy product. And that got us to over 100 million in wallet sales per year. And then the expansion into rings is like, it's just another beachhead where most men don't buy a ring. Most men do not think about buying a ring, but it's a necessity that everyone has to buy. So we've been able to build like a huge business just doing that. That's in its second year. It's already doing 8 figures. And then luggage is just like the natural expansion that Away and Monos, they're all going after the same type of consumer, mostly female heavy, mostly like millennial. And who's making luggage for your dad, right? Like Toomey had that for a long time, but Toomey's moving up market. Toomey's trying to sell luggage for $800+ and Samsonite's there. And like my dad travels with like a duffel bag that's all beat up. And maybe at some point somebody will buy him good luggage, and Ridge wants to be like the male forward version of that.
And like not try to go super hard into the D2C podcast vibe, but like it's funny because there's always this conversation of brand versus growth. I'm like, you don't need brand. There's always this argument recently that you don't need brand. But I find it interesting because I think you're a case study of the opposite, is that you built such a brand with Ridge where men trust your brand already because of these wallets, that you were able to expand into jewelry, which is, this quote unquote jewelry is a really hard market. As a media buyer, that was like one of the niches I never wanted to get into because it was really difficult, but you had a brand to support. And these men were like, well, I already have a wallet. Like, duh, this makes sense. This is the one-stop shop. And then you've got luggage. You have expansion. Ridge is not just wallets. Ridge is a brand. That's at least my take from it. I think you guys did a really good job of it. But
I appreciate that. No, I think brand is overblown. People try to have brand when they're doing $5 million a year, and it's like, dude, you're not even a blip on the radar, right? And beautiful brands, right, like Blue Apron or that House, which was like an alcohol brand, beautifully done, so thoughtful and crafted. And now they are just puffs of dust in the wind. All of them end up going bankrupt. All of them go away, and it's like, you need brand at a certain point, but you can't be precious about it when you don't have the revenue to back it up. You have to earn brand, which takes a really long time. And we did Ruby and Ridge for fucking 12 years. I joined in 2016. They were doing like 5 million a year, and we're lucky to be able to do the things we do now.
I mean, I don't know if you know this, but I come from brand and I also come from agency, and I see both sides of the coin. Like in the beginning, and so I've worked with like Nike, I've worked with Impossible Foods when they've just launched, like all these like different brands of different categories of business. And they really heavily leaned into brand. And the problem that I had was it was hard to have any type of validation behind this like brand initiative. I would say like there would be no tangible metric to growth when it came to building up this brand, this idea of brand. And that really bothered me. Like I understood it had a trickle effect down the road, but I wanted to see an immediate return. That was really hard for me. So I see both sides of it. But anyway, my point of this is actually to talk about failures. And we're here to talk about success. Sure, that was awesome. But I know for a fact the Sean that's here today definitely had some failures that led to some really great wins, or maybe a defining moment, whether personal, professional, et cetera. Honor us. Tell us like what happened that I guess was a defining moment for you.
Right. So we'll start the story earlier than we usually do. Usually we just talk about Ridge and the agency or whatever, but I moved to LA when I was like 18, had absolutely no money, right? Very little bit of like, there was no safety net to fall back on. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to make this work. I lived in a flop house in LA. Like, to describe that, it was either 18 or 20 guys in a 3-bedroom house in bunk beds, where the bunk beds were like $400 a month. Like, it's pretty easy to make things work when like all you have to do is come up with $400 every month. And I worked at my first job in e-com. I was probably 19. I was the director of operations for a company called Jeen that ended up being bankrupt. Like, they totally went bankrupt. This is very early, like 2015. Instagram meme pages, like no one ran ads. It was just like posting on Instagram to drive sales to Shopify. And that whole era was a failure. Like it was just learning how all these things worked for the first time, and dealing with like being 19 in a city you don't know anybody with no money. You have to kind of make it work. So out of Shopify, I ended up just doing consulting for a bunch of brands. And then I found my way into an agency, and then I found my way starting an agency. And when I joined Ridge, I was 22, right? Like in 2016, I was 22 years old. And I was like, oh yeah, I have an agency business. Of course, we're going to scale this thing up. And I was over the weekend, I was on vacation. I was talking to somebody about this, and I'm like, yeah, Facebook ads was just a young person's game at that point. Like in 2016, there was no gray-haired professional who like monopolized Facebook ads, which is like probably is today kind of what it looks like. It's a mature industry. Back then, it just wasn't. Like, you could be 16 and make an agency, or be 18 or 20 and have clients that pay you $10,000 a month to do the service. So it was failure to get to that point for sure. I mean, you're all just figuring it out. And I think there's probably no better place to do that than 2014 LA.
But how terrifying is that? You're like 19 years old and you have this role of director of operation, which, by the way, so I was Supra Footwear, which is a skate brand, at 23. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, but thanks for this huge budget and I'm going to figure it out. And I'm going to like save face. Like, I'm not going to tell anybody I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to do it. Like 19, that title, it's got to be like, walk me through that. Or were you just completely, you didn't care? You just kept going.
Well, at Shop Jeen, nobody knew what the fuck they were doing. I mean, Jeen,
Oh, just,
I mean, so it was ran out of an apartment. So Aaron and Amelia started this business where the whole idea was to be like Spencer's or Hot Topic for Gen Z. And I joined because I was reading the newspaper and I heard there was an article, I think it was the New York Times, talking about how they were going to be like Hot Topic for Gen Z. And it was the first time I heard Gen Z ever.
yeah.
I was 19. I'm like, people weren't even talking about that. I'm like, oh, fuck, that's that new shit. I should go do what that is. So I just sent them an email. I'm like, hey, can I work here? And they said, sure. And that's how like there was no employees, there was no infrastructure. Like it was a party culture. And, it was early before Alibaba and like maybe dropshipping was just starting to be a thing. They would just find like knockoff Chanel phone cases, and then they would sell them on the Shopify store. So there wasn't an infrastructure for me to feel like a failure or for me to feel any sort of imposter syndrome. I showed up and I'm like, oh shit, these people have no idea what they're doing. I was like, well, how much money do they have? We're like, we don't know. Like, I had to find out how to log into the bank account. I had to find out how to pay our 3PL. So very much trial by fire, but that's what got me to where I am today. So, I was probably there for 5 or 6 months, and then I was just looking at the books and I'm like, oh, we have no money, guys. We have to shut this thing down. Like they were very cool. They were very hip. This was like, I mean, if you come from skate culture, like this was just when Rip and Dip was blowing up. Like,
Yeah.
so like they knew those guys. So like Rip and Dip would give them product. They would sell that product. And then eventually Rip and Dip's like, hey, can you pay us? And they're like, we don't have any money. So vendors started shutting us down left and right. So we had to move to like only a print on demand model. And anyway, very quickly, I'm like, oh, we have no money left. We have to shut this thing down, like, and go our separate ways. So that was probably like March of 2015, or maybe even earlier, like very early. We're like, okay, we have to figure this thing out.
Yeah. It's weird. Like I've noticed, and you can tell me what you think, like CEOs, that's your title right now, is like CEOs have this superpower, at least good ones. Let me just clarify. The ones I think are good have this superpower where shit hits the fan and you're kind of neutral. Like there's some of them that are freak outs. There's some people freak out. Some people panic. Some people are neutral. Some people are like, okay, it's happening. Now what do we do next? And the ones that are calm, that are like, okay, we're good. What do we do next? I think are the ones that have dealt with the shit hitting the fan so many times that they're numb to it. They're like, whatever, fuck it, let's go. Do you feel like because of your experience with that and learning as you go, you're able to do that with Ridge today? Or are you not like that? Are you a panicker?
Well, I think I would describe myself as frantic most of the time.
Like to identify as frantic, actually?
Yeah, no, like if you work with me, you will get slacks that are cryptic and like probably like veiled threats. Like a lot of the time I sent those over to my team. But when things are actually broken, I'm very much someone who wants all of the information, then we'll try to make the best decision as quickly as possible. Just a personal example is there's a thing called Prenuvo where you can go pay for an MRI, right? And I never go to the doctor. I've probably never been to the doctor in like 12 years, right? But what I do is I go to Prenuvo and I'm like, okay, just tell me if I have cancer. And you show up, they scan you, they're like, no, you're good. I'm like, cool. I never have to, and I'll come back next year and I'll catch cancer if it happens, right? And I talk to a lot of people and they're like, oh no, I would never do that. I don't want to know. If there's a tumor, I don't want to know. And I'm like, oh, I'm the opposite. Give me the worst information as soon as possible so I can make a decision and then move on. I think that's probably a good trait as like a leader. If you're going to be an executive, you can't run from problems, right? Like if you want to find mold as soon as it is so you can fix it. But some people just want to sweep it under the rug.
I've never understood that. And again, like different personality traits. I've never, so like I came from a very confrontational type of family where it's like we talk about everything. There's no leaving the table until we talk about it and then we move on. And as I started growing up and looking at different types of leaders, it's funny that you self-actualize as frantic. I'm dead. That's amazing. I now know that. But also like calm in the real storm. right? There's little storms and there's big storms. So yeah, I see that. And people who take things head on are some of the best. I'm looking at different CEOs, different leaders, different founders, and trying to see if there's like these familiar traits. And as I'm seeing it, I'm like, no, the only thing I see is endurance. Like that's the only trait I see as a through line. Do you see anything else? Like any other specific trait?
No, there's a million ways to pilot the ship, and all of them are valid until you hit rocks. It's like, so, you bring up endurance. Yeah, endurance is probably the number one survival trait because the longer you do it, the more you get to be in the race.
Mhm.
And I think all of us, the default state of a business is bankruptcy, right? Like revenue is not guaranteed. Like growth is not guaranteed. Survival's not guaranteed. Like if you do nothing, eventually the entropy of the universe leads to chaos and then bankruptcy. Like we are all like, I think companies very much are living things, and they're probably more like a city than like a human body, right? But it needs a lot of inputs, it needs a lot of outputs. Yeah. So anyway, that's why I think endurance or bias to action or getting something done, like that's what makes startups so important. And I really don't think there's anything that different between a startup and the big company, except for that the startups are still founder led. I think big companies can be just as dynamic and successful as long as they're founder led, or you have an executive who has the traits of being a founder, which just means like you're willing to break things to make them better over time.
Willing to break things to make them better every time is key. I think you're absolutely spot on there. Um, okay. So I guess I have another question for you. If you could go back, which I'm actually not the biggest proponent of looking backwards too much, but I think it's also important if you could go back and tell yourself, look, like you can do this. I guess my point is like, where would you go back and talk to yourself and say, hey, like you can do this or push this harder? Is there any moment that you look back and go, I should have fucking pushed harder here?
Oh, 2013, if Bitcoin, if I could, if I, I
Right, that's where you go. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
if I could say three words at any point to my former self, 2013, buy Bitcoin, probably that. No, we talk about this all the time. Like I jokingly about crypto, but my CMO Connor is like hella into it. I mean, the guy's been early to all of that type of stuff. And I talked to Daniel and his dad, the original founders of Ridge. We talked about like, oh, where could we have changed it? I wish I spent more money on Facebook in 2016,
Yeah.
2017, 2018. Every year I wish I would have spent more money. But all things considered, we look at the outcomes. We're a top 1% outcome, right? Like out of
Yeah.
the distribution curve, if we just let it play out 100 times in 100 different universes, the outcome we reached is the top 1%. I mean, we own the entire company. We've never raised any money. We will do 8 figures of net income this year. I get to make millions of dollars a year. And I cannot stress that I'm 30 this year. Like 12 years ago, I literally had no money. 10 years ago, I had no money. I was working at Shop Jeen, totally bankrupt, like had nothing figured out, right? So to think 10 years later, I could be a millionaire. No, it's a top 1% outcome. Could I get to a top 5 outcome, right? Not just a top 1%, like literally a top 5 outcome. Yeah, if I would have bought more Bitcoin or if I would have spent more money on Facebook ads, but all things considered, like we totally crushed it. So yeah, I think it is bad to look in the rearview mirror. It's like because the thing is, I'm 30. Phoenix, how old are you?
I just turned 31.
Okay, you're 31. Bro, we have like 50 more years of
I
building a
know.
business ahead of us. To look back on the past 10 and be like, oh, I should have did these things so much different. I'm like, we're still in the first inning. It's like, yeah, we're up by a lot. I mean, the game is not even over yet. We're in the first inning of maybe the second game. There's 180 games a year. So we have a very long season ahead of us.
I appreciate the baseball references. My husband is a lefty pitcher, and that was his thing. And that's all I hear is baseball references all day. So I appreciate that. Also, what's funny is that what you said is so true. Like, we're about the same age, right? Pretty much. And my mom came to this country when she was 16 with nothing during the Vietnam War, and she became a millionaire before 30. And she sponsored her whole family to come here. It's like a pretty awesome story. But I sit back and I look at this because I have this like mentality of like, doing the bare minimum isn't good enough. like because of what she's done. And I feel like what I'm doing right now is the bare minimum, which is taking risks, is doing the things that we have opportunities to do. And like, yeah, shit happens and like you will be broke like you were 10 years ago. I was basically fucking dead ass broke as well. And then things will change. And then we'll probably be broke again in this lifetime. And then we'll probably regain money, you know? And it's just the mentality of that's why I say endurance. But yeah, I align with a lot of what you said. That's really awesome because I think it needs to be talked about for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think people love to talk about like, there's a weirdness about money on both ends of the spectrum. Like people don't want to talk about when they're broke. They also don't want to talk about when they're rich. Like, and then getting the details about how to get out of each of those situations. Cause yeah, no, you just have to take risks. I mean, that's what it all comes down to. And it's very easy that like the more you move up the curb, the less risk you want to take. But like, bro, I'm pushing the company to do random shit all of the time. I'm like, no, we have to launch rings. Like that was a controversial decision because like it's like, yeah, does it hurt brand or like how are we going to stand out? I'm like, doesn't matter. Shots on goal. Take as many shots as possible, and some of them go in.
Well, you guys stood out because the ring situation was interesting. You know what got me? And it always like irks me a little bit when an ad gets me because I'm like, you got me of all people, like a media buyer. But anyway, what got me was this guarantee of like the 3-ring guarantee, right? You can replace it, I think, 2 or 3 times. And what do I think about when I think about my husband? No offense, love you, Ryan, is him losing his ring or like he works with his hands, so it's scuffing it up, something happening, whatever it may be. And I'm like, wow, this is really great. He also loves it because he loves bridge. That was just a different take on a category that you tapped into. You still always have a different take. You still are different. It's not just Ridge is now making rings, right? So definition there.
Yeah, I know this isn't supposed to be a D2C podcast, but the reason we did that is like we need to make offers that are no brainers, right?
Yeah.
Like it makes so much sense to buy this because people are distracted. We all have TikTok brain. Like getting money from somebody is really difficult, but it's like, here's an offer that is believable, but also like is so much better than what stands out in the crowd. And that's the whole, like the ring guarantee thing. Yeah. So that's really awesome. Also dude, like it's this whole thing that like we have to solve problems. Half of all men have never bought a wallet. 50% of men on earth never bought a wallet. That's because it's gifted to them by some woman in their life. Right. So it's like, okay, we have to make an offer that's, very compelling for them to purchase. One size fits all, like lifetime guarantee, easy exchanges, whatever. And then with rings, 25% of men lose a ring every 7 years. So it's like, oh yeah, there's just a huge market of guys who lose their shit all the time. They're just taking it off, they're throwing it down. It's like, okay, we have to solve for that. So
That's my point is that you knew that and you listen and you react. And a lot of people don't. Like it's this concept of forcing something because you believe that's the offer, that's what needs to be done, instead of looking at the problem and solution like you did, which is like a no-brainer, but I believe common sense isn't common. But that leads me to the last segment, which I really want to talk about, which is hot takes. And this is where I kind of go into my hot take. I'll go first. You can think about it, make it as spicy as you want or not. You can make it lukewarm. But I will say for attribution. So obviously I'm attribution software. A lot of people have hot takes about this. And I think that we did a disservice in not understanding who our ICP was, in a sense where attribution platforms were targeted towards brand owners. Unlike you, who truly understands the media buying side, analytics, attribution, all of that, most brand owners don't. They're in the business. They're constantly looking at, are we profitable? They're not going to go to get down to the granular level of attribution. Not most. So when these platforms were marketing towards the brand owners because they swipe their credit cards, who are the people actually using these platforms? Tacticians, media buyers, agencies. So I think like my hot take is we've been marketing the wrong people this whole time. And that was like an aha moment for me. That's my hot take.
yeah, that's probably right. Here's a hot take about attribution. I've said that like, at least for Northbeam, you don't need Northbeam until you're spending at least $1 million a month. But here's the attribution future I'm going to paint for everybody. People are like, oh, Triple Whale versus Northbeam versus AdBeacon, all these different attribution platforms. It's a world where you use all of them. And here's the reason why. Ridge will spend $100 million this year on media, and I have friends that spend $500 million a year on media. How do they make those decisions, right? Well, there's probably 20% of that media buy that is totally wasted, totally not incremental, just bidding on your own fucking people or whatever. And that's like a real brand that I'm close with. $500 million a year in media spend. That's $100 million a year in wasted media marketing. So I think there's still a gold rush to be built of just tools to help optimize that. That's what MMMs are. That's what third-party tools are. That's what all these different things are. And there's just a world where there's an aggregator of attribution data to build one actual source of truth. And
Yeah.
that's when you're spending for 6 or 10 different of these tools, because it doesn't matter if you spend $5 million a year on random software, if you have to spend for 5 of them or 10 of them or whatever, if it helps you spend that $100 million a year better, right? And Facebook's on the market of making you spend money better. Google's on the market of making you spend money better. So it's kind of on you. And yeah, dude, I would love if you could just have one thing, but like we use House, we've used, I can't remember the MMM we've used, but we've used all of these different tools, and all of it is just be like, is this spend good or bad? Right. And I could just see that like moving up market when you're an LVMH and your marketing budget is literally $10 billion a year, you should probably spend $400 million a year in attribution software to make sure you're spending it correctly. So I guess that's my hot attribution take, is that it's not a winner take all market. The winning brands probably use 6 different things.
I actually completely agree with you. I believe like all of them are synergistic to some degree. I'm like really good so I'm friends with Michael True from Prescient.ai. And then like, I've got some friends at Triple, I've got some friends at Northbeam, and I always believe like the flag in the sand for me is first party data, but then attribution also plays a hand in it. Then you've got MMM, and the more advanced you get, the more money you spend, you need more. And I completely agree with you. I actually don't think that's a hot take. I think that's like completely dead on.
Dude, and what's so fucked up to say is that like there's going to be a new type of agency then. I mean, I'm sure there already exists for very large brands that just looks at all of this data to tell you what to do. It's like there's an agency to be built that just services the largest brands and just hooks up all of these tools and then just actually reports and actions on it. So, dude,
That
it's
would
a
be,
real
I feel like you would sign up for that, but yeah, you're just like,
yeah.
yeah,
And that's the problem, is that like I think it's the same thing with podcasts, right? Like My First Million, great podcast, but it has to go towards the largest audience, right? Which is people who are just generally interested in e-commerce. And then you have like the Logan Bartlett show, which is like in-depth interviews with VC founders, which is just more niche by nature because less people care about that, right?
right.
And what I'm trying to say is that e-com Twitter or LinkedIn or conferences will just have more small brands who have bad experiences with these tools because like they're told they need to use it. So there's 10,000 people who sign up for Triple Whale at $99 a month or whatever, when the people actually get value out of that, there's like 40 people on earth, right? And how do you reach those 40? How do you reach those ICPs? And it's just probably close relationships with the best agencies who have like actually really tight client relationships. And then look, as the client pool changes, as legacy brands start to die off and D2C brands get bigger, I mean, hopefully they just are more natively inclined to use tools like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's without beating a dead horse, but that's what we figured out. It's our relationships with agencies, our retention is through the roof in terms of agencies versus brands. We looked at our churn and we're like, okay, we either have a really shitty product or we've hit the wrong ICP. And we realized, no, people are using our product. It's actually just because this is just not, they don't have the bandwidth to utilize this that the agencies do right now. And having those deep relationships with those agencies, and as they grow and have better relationships with like the Ridges, the Hexclads, down the road are going to have more and more tools that they're going to need in their arsenal. It's an interesting take that you have with the agency being more data driven and then telling you what to do next. Could be really fun, but yeah. Anyway,
Okay.
I'm really happy. Wait, what were you going to say?
I just want to agree with you. It's because brand owners do not get into this to look at dashboards. They got into it because they love product or like, whatever reason they got into it, but they get pulled in a million different directions. I have HR issues. I have income tax. I have sales tax, all these different things I have to do. Where if you're in the media business, if you're an agency or an ad buyer, you got into it because that's what you like and that's what you enjoy, right? And like it's an unfortunate task in a brand owner's list that like, oh fuck, I have to do Facebook ads. But if you do Facebook ads for a living, you're like, oh, I love this. So it makes a lot of sense to switch the whole marketing channel just to to agency owners because they're going to be more receptive and interested in what you have to talk about.
It's for them. Like, that's my point. It's for them. That was my hot take altogether. It's like, I'm going after the wrong people. I mean, brand owners, again, it's more of a pain in the ass to talk about Facebook ads. They know it's a necessary evil. They know that Amazon's a necessary evil. They know all, like, TikTok's a necessary evil, TikTok Shop, all of it. Let the experts use the tools that are needed for them and let the brand owners use the tools that are needed for them. But anyway, I could go on this for like 3 hours, I swear. But either way, I'm honored and we are honored to have you on the podcast. Sean, if you can leave us with words where they could find you, how people can talk to you, should they blow up your DMs with questions? Should they not blow up your DMs with questions?
You could just talk to me on the internet. I'm on Twitter. I'm not hard to find. I'll respond to some amount of people sometimes. So thank you for having me. And I wish you all the luck and success in the world.
Oh, thank you. You as well. Thank you so much. Bye.